All right, we're going to call to order the regularly scheduled Planning Commission meeting of October 4th, 2013. We'll let the record show that all Planning Commissioners are present. And if you will join me in pledging to the flag, please stand. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. This brings us to the point in the meeting where we open it up to public comments, and this is for items that are not on the agenda. So is there anyone here that wants to speak to something that is not on the agenda tonight?
Yes, one.
We had one here, okay. Mary Alcroft, if you'll come up, restate your name and city of residence for the record, please.
Hello. My name is...
Technical difficulty, hang on.
Hello. My name is Mary Althoff, longtime resident of the city of Lake Forest. And I'm here representing the Save Lake Forest petition circulators and residents who signed the petitions. These are the petitions we gathered for TrueMark, and these are the petitions we gathered for Brookfield. So I'm here to give you some feedback from your fellow citizens. Nearly 5,000 people, the majority of them registered voters, your friends, neighbors, were so disappointed in the City Council's decision to go ahead with the Brookfield and TrueMark projects. They came out in droves to sign the petition. Nearly 100 people volunteered to help in this effort by collecting signatures. Indeed, some were former planning commissioners, former mayors, sitting council members, and employees of the city. Your job as a planning commission is to look after the well-being of the city. Of course, we should be business friendly. Of course, we should respect the rights of property owners, but never to the detriment of the city. And who determines what's best for the city? Because direct democracy is difficult. We have a representative system, and our representatives are elected to appoint to look after our best interests. But the true holder of the power is the people, and the people have spoken in numbers never imagined. The lesson you should take from this is how far removed you are from the will of the people in the case of TrueMark. Your judgment was extremely poor. You chose to do things to the city that the people do not want. True, the City Council took the burden of the Save Lake Forest movement and may ultimately pay a bigger price. But your part in this travesty is nonetheless culpable. Granted, you were only allowed to give recommendations to the City Council, and you were correct in voting no on Brookfield. TrueMark, you voted against the voting public. Please think about what you did. How could you make a decisions that were in so opposition with what the people wanted? I'm sure you thought you were doing the right thing, but it's you versus more than 4,000 of your fellow citizens who are registered voters. That should tell you something. Moving forward, I trust that you will think hard about your decisions, and do a better job representing the will of the people. The residents of Lake Forest are now paying attention to your actions. I thank you for your consideration on this.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any other people who would like to speak on public comments? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on. That takes us to the approval of the minutes, the consent calendar. Has everybody had a chance to look at that, and do we have a motion?
I'll have approval. I'll second.
Do we have a second? All in favor? Aye. Aye. Do we have an abstention?
We do.
Okay, we have one abstention for absence from the last meeting. Okay, and do we have any nays? No nays, so it passes. It takes us to public hearings, plan and sign program.
Yes, our first hearing tonight is the plan sign program for an amendment to the sign program for Jack in the Box. And Jennifer Mansour has a report this evening.
Good evening, Chairman and Commissioners.
The item before you tonight is a modification to the existing plan sign program for the new Jack in the Box restaurant, which is located in Hunter Court Shopping Center on the corner of El Toro and Rockfield. In 2012, the Planning Commission approved a site development permit for the replacement of the Jack in the Box restaurant building with a brand new building which is currently under construction and is getting very close to being complete. If you've been out there, it's almost done. During the same meeting, the Planning Commission also approved a plan sign program for the new building, which included drive-through signage and 3 wall signs on the building. The city sign code would have allowed for signs on all 4 elevations on the building, but at the time, the applicant was only proposing 3 signs. The 3 wall signs that were included in the plan sign program were approved with a deviation from the city sign code for both logo and letter height. This project is a request to amend the plan sign program to add the 4th wall sign that is allowed by city's code. This 4th sign will be located on the southwest elevation and will be visible from traffic on Aurora Road and would be smaller than the other wall signs on the building. This sign will meet the city's requirements of the sign code and is in compliance with the El Toro design guidelines. Accordingly, staff is recommending that the Planning Commission adopt the corresponding resolution amending the plan sign program for the Jack in the Box. The adoption of this resolution will replace the originally approved plan sign program with the new one. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them, and the applicant is in the audience tonight. Thank you.
Do we have any questions for staff? I see no questions. Would the applicant like to come up? Let's see. Is that Christina Gibson?
It is.
All right. If you'll restate your name and your city of residence for us for the record.
Sure. My name is Christina Gibson. I reside in San Diego, California.
Thank you.
Do you have any questions for me in regards to what we're proposing?
Well, I'll find out.
Okay.
Anybody have any questions for the applicant? Looks like we might have one. No?
Just more of an observation. Am I correct in kind of looking through it? It looks like it was just kind of an afterthought, like, you know what, maybe we do want one there after all.
Yes, exactly, because they don't have a freestanding monument sign, and if you're driving east on El Toro, you don't really notice that it's a Jack in the Box until you're approaching Rockfield. So it might be a little dangerous to have to do a quick right turn.
Okay. I don't see any other questions right now. We'll discuss it up here, and if we have more, we'll call you back up.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you. We've already opened the public hearing, so do we have any comments up here? Commissioner Bourbon?
I think this is a brilliant thing for that exact reason. You've got eastbound traffic. This will alert them that it's there rather than waiting and then creating an obvious traffic hazard that will result because I know how people drive, especially when food's involved. I'm in favor of this.
Thank you. Commissioner Fuentes, anything?
I love the graphics. It's clean, it's nice, and I wish you good luck on your new business.
Any other comments?
Just that last time I drove past there, I thought, it's odd that there's a sign on that wall, but not that one. So that's why I thought maybe it was just an afterthought. Like originally you thought maybe we don't need it. Then you saw it yourself and said maybe we do.
Right,
so,
exactly.
So thank you.
Okay, so it sounds like we're ready for a motion.
I will make a motion to adopt resolution PC 2013- and you don't have it, for the Plan Sign Program 7-12-2709. I'm sorry, 8-13-3526, which was an amendment to the previous number I gave. And close the public hearing.
Second.
Okay, we have a second. Let's take a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? None opposed. So it passes unanimously. Great, thank you. Good luck. We're excited about the new restaurant and looking forward to the opening.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Thank you,
Okay, item number 3, site development permit.
Yes, this item is a site development permit for exterior modifications to 3 buildings at the Sycamore Plaza. Jennifer also has a report for this item.
Jennifer, before we go too far down
Yes.
the road, I live within 500 yards of 2 of the 3 buildings, so I'm going to go ahead and accuse myself before we get into this.
Okay. Do you know where? Okay. We'll remember to come get you.
Don't forget him. All right, this item is a site development permit for facade remodel at Sycamore Plaza, which is located on the corner of El Toro and Trabuco. Sycamore Plaza is made up of one main multi-tenant building that includes the Stater Brothers, a smaller 4-tenant building, and 4 freestanding buildings, which include Chase, Bank, Arco, Chipotle, and Del Taco. The center is divided into 8 parcels, and 4 of these parcels are owned by the same group of owners, which includes the main multi-tenant building, with the exception of Stater Brothers, who owns their own building, the Chase building, and the 4-tenant building. This project is a facade remodel for these specific buildings that they own. All the other buildings at the site have undergone facade remodels over the last decade. However, these 4 buildings have remained unchanged since the development of the site in the 80s. The facade remodel includes the removal of the existing wood features on the building, which includes the columns, the header, and the rafter tails. The project includes adding new plaster columns with stacked stone veneer bases, a parapet wall that is situated approximately halfway up the existing roof, so that a portion of the existing roof shingle will still be visible. This parapet would extend the height of the building from about 20 feet to 23 feet, and the parapet has a varying roof line and includes a decorative cornice. The buildings will also feature a new earth tone color scheme. The project doesn't include any modifications to the use of the buildings, the parking lot, the landscaping, or to the building footprints, so the shopping center is in compliance with the city's zoning code requirements. The proposed facade remodel will modernize the architecture of the center, which currently exhibits a dated appearance, while incorporating design elements that are consistent with the city's design guidelines. Pursuant to the guidelines, the project utilizes the same stacked stone material that was used on the previous remodels of Stater Brothers and Del Taco, and is compatible with the adjacent shopping center with the Fresh and Easy that underwent facade remodel in 2010. Overall, the building facades are well articulated with the inclusion of stone veneer, varying parapet heights, and decorative cornices. The proposed earth tone colors are consistent with the design guidelines, the colors used on the adjacent shopping center, and are compatible with the colors of the freestanding buildings in Sycamore Plaza. However, the colors are not consistent with the approved and current colors of the Stater Brothers building, which is primarily blue and gray. In staff's opinion, the remodel will be more compatible with the rest of the center if the Stater Brothers tenant space was repainted to match the colors of the facade remodel. The city requested that the applicant contact the property owner for Stater Brothers to discuss the option of repainting the building to match the new colors. To date, the applicant has not provided any information to the city about these discussions. To address the issue, staff included a condition of approval requiring the applicant to offer to repaint the Stater Brothers building to match the new proposed colors. Since the staff report was written, I personally got in contact with Stater Brothers, their property manager I think they're in Riverside, for this site, and I provided the email from her that is on the dais. The email states that Stater Brothers would allow the applicant to repaint the building under the conditions that the applicant pays for the painting and that Stater Brothers would be able to inspect the work to ensure the painting meets their specifications. Overall, this project is consistent with the intent of the city's design guidelines and represents an aesthetic improvement over the existing condition of the site. Accordingly, staff is recommending that the Planning Commission adopt a resolution to approve the facade remodel with the recommended conditions. The applicant and the property owner are in the audience tonight, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have about this project.
Okay, thank you. We'll start up here. Commissioner Hamilton?
Yes, just first a comment. I think it's not an Arco station that's in that corner. It's a Circle K mobile. So I thought I'd just mention that. During your presentation, I thought I heard you say something about the code enforcement. Did you just mention that?
Not in this presentation, but we do have some code enforcement issues that they've had out there for maintenance of their parking lot and some of the handicapped parking striping and signage. There's a condition of approval that they do need to have those complied with prior to issuance of any building permits for the project. They have been working with code enforcement on that and have agreed to do that.
Okay, I must have just misheard what I thought I heard you say. There were no code enforcement violations, so that's all I had.
Commissioner Verplank?
Yeah, I didn't notice any color palettes here. Are you prepared to present to us any of that tonight, or is the applicant prepared to present color palettes for us?
The colors are shown in the colored elevation, but I can actually go get the color board if you'd like. I can bring with me.
I think that
Cheryl's going to go get the color board for me. It's in my office.
Thank you.
You don't mean, you don't know what dry sage, November rain, and Mississippi mud and smokestack gray look like?
I'm familiar with all those words, yes, thank you.
Commissioner Fuentes, any comments? Questions for staff?
I think the report was quite thorough, and I like the idea that we're taking those old wood planks and making them stucco. I'm sure our fire department would appreciate that too, and as a woods resident, anytime we can do that with that old wood, it's a good thing. Thank you for your thorough report.
I don't think I have any questions for staff at this point, so let's move on to opening the public hearing and hear from the applicant. That would be Jessica Steiner. You could repeat your name and city of residence for our record.
My name is Jessica Steiner, representing Victor Underwood, the applicant from Newport Beach. I just want to thank staff for, like you said, a very thorough report. It's been very helpful, and I'm available for questions, as is the public.
Okay, well, before you go away, let's see if we have any questions for you. Any questions of the applicant?
What exactly is that sage color? Oh, I mean,
It's kind of
Don't forget to turn your mic on. I had a question for you. I like the plans. I think they look good. Vast improvement over now, and I think it when we had the shopping center across the street with Fresh and Easy in it, we went through some of the same kinds of issues probably that we'll discuss with you tonight in trying to revamp these older shopping centers. But the question I had, and the only comment I had, was in some of the we like to see more definition in the elevations, and you certainly provided some in the roof line. But I was looking at Stater Brothers, and I see how it has a pitched roof in the center, and I was wondering if the pitched roof in the center, where you now have indentations on the roof lines, wouldn't add a really nice touch to it. And I think I'd have to say it probably wouldn't be something that I would require, but it's just something I think would really add a lot of aesthetic appeal to the property. So I guess my question is that even conceivable? And if so, we might have you work with staff on something like that.
I think anything's possible. Obviously, we'll have to consult with the client. But as long as we're staying within height limitations for code, that's the only thing that pops out in my mind.
Yeah, you should have plenty of room for that. So, and I just think what you have is a long stretch of building. And again, we have the same issue across the street, where you have a long stretch of building, you have a couple of outcrops, but they're pretty minor. And then you don't get that definition, that look that jumps out at you and says, come shop here. And so just a thought that it might enhance the overall appeal. And hopefully it wouldn't be too expensive, but I'm no pro on that. So.
We can definitely look into something.
Okay. Any other questions for the applicant? All right, thank you. Do we have anyone else in the audience who would like to talk to this topic? Okay. Seeing none, we'll bring it back up here for discussion. Anybody like to start?
well, I have a question with regards to the addition that you're suggesting.
Mm-hmm.
Would the Stater Brothers building have had that high rise prior to what they did to upgrade their particular building? Or did they add that height that Chairman is referring to?
I think Jennifer is familiar with the history on the Stater Brother remodel.
I brought the plans, but I'm not sure how to look it up.
We'll give you a second because I think that's a good question. Honestly, I don't remember either. And certainly it wouldn't have to be of the same dimension as you have with Stater Brothers. It would be much smaller, in comparison to the size of the buildings.
I think I just always recalled that having that perch up on top. I'm sorry, my terminology is incorrect, but it was always a little bigger at Stater Brothers.
Based on the plans from 2004, it looks like they put new tiles on it, but that the roof was there before. They just put new tiles on it. It looks like also it was a little flatter. They added a little more articulation to it. It was always a higher roof.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, we'll go over here. Anybody else have any comments?
Yeah, we're at the comments section, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. All right. I think this is a great idea. I remember when the Bonds, just a little bit down the way, was there, and then they split it in two and remodeled that whole center. I think that center was really lacking quite a bit more than the current. I think the current condition of this Sycamore property it's in decent shape. I know the Stater Brothers recently did an inside remodel, and I think that's a really good enhancement to the property. And I really think that there's other enhancements that could be done even beyond the ones that you're proposing. I was ready to go and approve this, even if Stater Brothers, along with staff's recommendation, that the benefits and merit of the project outweigh the inconsistent, potential colors if Stater Brothers weren't. So I'm full on board with this.
Mr. Verplank?
Yeah. Jeremy, I agree with your comments. I think we need to have a little more articulation there. I like this, and I like the fact that the majority, pretty much all the wood is going to be covered up now. And so if we're going to get into that, I do have the same concerns as Chairman Zachmeister, that you don't have enough articulation in those longer runs. I think it would just tie it in and update the center more fully than it is. So I would like to see us work with the applicant and see what we can come up with.
The only other comment I have is I have a little bit disagree with you on Commissioner Hamilton in the color schemes. I really think we don't want a mixed match of colors, so I'm highly for it. I'm glad to see that Stater Brothers is willing to go with the newer tone colors, so that's wonderful. So I'd like to make sure we put that in as a condition.
And if I can add one more thing, I think I'm agreeing with the chairman that the additional articulation is always desirable, but I don't think I would necessarily add that to the actual conditions.
Any other comments? Do we want to do a motion?
I'll make a motion here. I'd like to go ahead and close the public hearing on this, and I would make a motion that we would approve site development permit 7-13-3451 with the condition that staff work with the applicant to come back to us with a revision to add a few areas of articulation on those long runs, and quite possibly include on that building number 4, possibly, although I don't know that building number 4 has enough room. So I'm more concerned about 1 and 2 in light of that. So that would be my motion.
Okay, do we have a second? I will second. And but let me. Okay.
The operator wants to know if he can speak.
Sure. I think we have would certainly like to hear from you. You will need to fill out a form like this. Not right now. When you get done. When you get done, and then just state your name and residence for us.
My name is Jim Collins. I am one of the owners in Irvine, California. The discussion about trying to come up with a more varied facial line across the shop buildings was a conversation we had with staff, and we kind of went over a lot of possibilities. And we seem to have a set of limitations on realistically what we can do with small space. Estater Brothers has 50,000 square feet and 100 and some odd feet of frontage, and they can absorb a large monument structure at the center of the property that kind of announces the entire property to all the shoppers. Our fascias, our shops are about 1,000 feet. They're 25, 30 feet wide, and they rely heavily on each of their signs above their businesses. And so we try to give it as much undulation as we can without disturbing, the identification of that small business. If we had a drug, which is, 25,000 square feet, or some other large user, we could end up with a larger monument, a larger statement on their facade. But with the series, the shop buildings are just small tenants in small spaces. It's hard to, create a large, difference and still allow them a sign that can be identified with their front door, their window, and their product. So it is something we discussed with staff, and we kind of worked it around and came up with the undulations that we have now, which are the ups and the downs, and try to give a little more definition, a little more height. But to try to come up with a large cupola or something in the middle of a shop building, it gets kind of clumsy sometimes. And I'm not sure it would achieve ultimately what you would like to see happen, and it would be very difficult to make it look right without losing a couple of tenants along the way. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do you have any questions for the applicant?
No, I don't think I have any. I appreciate your perspective. Yeah, and obviously you and Jennifer worked with that to address that. I think I would be willing to modify my original motion to retract the condition.
Thank you. Okay, well, let's start with I'll retract my second. And would you like to go ahead and modify your motion?
Since the second's been retracted, I will now retract the condition and go ahead and move for approval upon staff's recommendation.
And that one I'll second.
And are we including the conditional approval with painting that fit the...
Yes.
Currently in the resolution.
It's already in there?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
Great.
Great. We have a second. Any discussion? All right. Let's have a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, passes. Good luck. We really appreciate it. We know it's going to be a great addition. Thank you.
very much.
Yeah, don't forget him.
I forgot you actually. Did you erase it? Oh, that's good. I had to go.
Okay, so I'll take us to item number 4, discussion on parking ordinances.
Yes, this item is a discussion item as its title implies, and the purpose of this is to allow the Commission to provide input and direction to staff regarding potential amendments to the parking standards. Cheryl Kuda has a report this evening.
Good evening, Chairman and members of the Planning Commission. The residential parking standards are the next step in the overall work program that staff has been working on for some time to comprehensively update the zoning code. We've been taking this comprehensive update in sort of bite-sized pieces and due to staffing and workload issues, and we have heard interest from the Commission to talk about residential parking. You are not being asked to make any decisions tonight. Just provide input to staff so we can move on to either bringing back additional information, if that's what you desire, or draft some code amendments. I'm just going to give you a brief overview of the staff report. We've also received some correspondence from Dr. Gardner late today. We did email it to, it was emailed to all of you. If you didn't get a chance to read it, it's in blue on the dais. The staff report begins with a discussion of background information regarding the city's existing housing stock and demographics. The first attachment to the staff report includes a map of all the census tracts in the city, and it also just shows for context where all the multifamily developments occur. There is an additional copy of that on your dais in 11 by 17 format. It's, I need to point out a correction on this one. The brown and yellow were swapped in the legend, so everything that was shown, it's all corrected now, but the idea is this is where all the multifamily development is, and it does differentiate between apartments and for sale. So the census data here is provided for background, and as we all know, the census provides a variety of data, such as age, income, number of cars per household, things like that. We really just focused in on owner and renter occupied and average household size. You know, this information can be tracked over time. That really was not the intent of this information. We just wanted to give you some broad context about kind of the existing situation and some of the residential parking influences. I also want to point out that the staff report says in general renter household size is slightly larger than owner occupied household size. Dr. Gardner's information points out that that's an error. Really, it's about 50-50. There are 8 census tracts where owner-occupied housing size is slightly larger, and there are 8 census tracts where renter-occupied is slightly larger. So it really is split down the middle. Also in the correspondence from Dr. Gardner, he points out that the number used to describe the future opportunity study area, the staff report references 4,000 units. Because all of those projects have now been approved and Portola Center is now pending approval with the City Council, we do know that the maximum number of units is set at 4,070. Dr. Gardner is correct. The Opportunity Study Program, EIR, did look at over 4,500, but the staff report is correct in calling that 4,000 units. Next, the staff report moves on to common parking issues. These are problems that we hear frequently about from the public. You hear them, we hear them, the council hears them. And this table is to illustrate that not all parking issues can be solved by changes in the code. We do have other tools available to address certain issues, and most of the time that is code enforcement. We have things in our code that code enforcement goes out and addresses as they come up. For example, we could collect information regarding inoperative vehicles or home occupations, but these are really addressed by code enforcement, and a change in your residential parking standard really isn't going to have any impact on those particular issues. So that's really what we're focused on here, and what the remainder of the staff report talks about are the changes to parking ratios. It's important to note that changes to the code really won't affect what's on the ground today. It will only apply to future new development. It's not possible to go into existing neighborhoods or apartments and require additional parking just because we changed the code. Anything that's on the ground today would be allowed to stay that way indefinitely. Also, changes in the code would not apply to the upcoming Opportunity Study residential projects. Those were all approved with the development agreement in 2008 and 2010 and set with the current parking standards. With all that said, we do want to look at the areas where we can get the most impact from changing the residential parking standards. So the staff report moves on to discuss multifamily and single-family parking standards. We give what the existing parking standards are and some comparisons. So specifically with multifamily, we provide a comparison with other cities in the county. In attachment 3, we have a table with the resident and guest ratios for multifamily for pretty much the whole county. We also use a sample 200-unit apartment project for a comparison. We used a select list of cities there, not because those have the same demographic characteristics as our city, but because they provide kind of a breadth of different approaches. Some of them use a flat standard, so same parking ratio no matter how many bedrooms you have. Some of them use a different guest ratio. Some of them change the guest ratio with the size of the unit. Just trying to show you that little changes around the margins really can have a big change. You see here from Table 4 that the swing here is from 357 to 462 for the same project. This section also talks about the city's guest ratio. We have a guest ratio of 0.2 parking spaces per unit flat across the board for both multifamily and single family. That's on the low side for the county average, and staff does make one recommendation that maybe you consider increasing that guest ratio. The staff report moves on to discuss single-family residential. This one's a little bit more difficult to draw a comparison among cities, just because of the different ways that some cities count garages, or they do or don't count driveway parking. It's just really not an apples-to-apples comparison. So what we're asking the Planning Commission to do in this case is consider the effectiveness of our current single-family standards and give us some recommendations, if any, regarding improvements that can be made. Next, the staff report talks about tandem parking. As we know, the code does not currently address tandem parking directly. It has been addressed on a case-by-case basis in the past, for example, as an alternative development standard in the Brookfield project and in the area plan for the Serrano Summit project. The Planning Commission can consider the information provided here by staff, and if the recommendation is to provide some standards for tandem parking, we've given a bullet list of some areas where those standards could be developed. And finally, we have a summary. The summary does recognize that we haven't really addressed any of the non-conforming status issues that I mentioned a few moments ago, that all of the city was developed using the current parking standards, and any increase in parking ratios would make the existing development non-conforming. Staff, after we get an idea of where the Planning Commission wants to go with this, we can do a full analysis of those non-conforming issues and bring you back some detailed information and options regarding how to treat non-conforming uses going forward if the parking code changes. In conclusion, the staff report does provide some recommendation, but the intent here really is to start the dialogue with the Planning Commission to see what your expectations are regarding the update to the code. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. How would you like to start the discussion? Would you like us just to go one by one and give you some thoughts about each of the items?
I would like that.
Okay. Which end should we start with tonight? You've been elected, Commissioner Hamilton.
All right. I think the first item, and I think I would prefer, if we go, I think there were 4 topics. We're just going to do one at a time instead of doing all 4 at once.
I'm good with that. If you'd like to do that, sure.
That's just my, all right. So the first is the multifamily residential. Sorry. Now I know why you wanted me to go first.
Chairman Steckmeister, we had one request to speak. Up to you if you wanted, how you'd like to handle that.
You want to do those first? That's fine with me too.
Up to you.
We actually have 2 requests to speak, I believe. So, is that okay with everyone? Can we listen to public comments first?
Absolutely.
Okay, well then let's do that. The first person I have to speak is Bob Holtzkla. I hope I didn't pronounce that too badly. If you can repeat your name and city of residence for us, for the record.
My name is Bob Holtzclaw, and I've been a resident here since 1977. Just not too long ago, about 6 months ago, and I don't know if this actually falls in your realm of Planning Commission, but maybe it could be forwarded to the City Council too. I just thought of making it permanent. We had no parking for street sweeping days. And it really turned out really well. And a lot of people in the neighborhood were really happy about it because it was such a waste of money to see a street sweeper go down the middle of the street and not sweep any gutters out and anything else, go around, back and back out of the neighborhood again. They put the signs up for about 2 weeks, and all of a sudden, all those old cars that were out there that we usually call the police on, and the police would come out, rule a ticket on it, they'd roll the car 6 feet, and then you start all over again. So, these people are streetwise, they know. When the signs went up, they ticketed that thing once or twice on the day of street sweeping. all those cars were gone. Somehow they found another place to park their cars. And these are public streets, of course, not the private. I know I belong to Lake Forest too, and we have a big problem with on the private streets of people parking their cars. But this is public streets. It worked great. I was told that, something that on the planning of it, that it was not cost worthy or something or other. I don't know what in the world, why they stopped it, but I thought it was a great idea. I don't know if even stars could go out there and actually just write the tickets. I don't know if they have the authority to do that, but it really cleaned up the neighborhoods. And I hope that maybe we can look at this again and possibly make it a permanent type of situation. I thank you.
Good. Great comments. Thank you very much. Second person I would like to speak is Dr. Gardner. Come up, state your name and city residence.
Good evening, Chairman, Commission members, staff. My name is Jim Gardner. I live in Lake Forest, and kudos, we're getting on to some planning. The report you have in front of you shows a lot of work, some useful information, but there are so many serious flaws. I hardly know where to begin. Not only am I not incorrect when I said that in general that statement's wrong, but if you look at this, you can see the differential, what we call in the scientific community, A-B interaction effects. It's not only that statement's incorrect, nor the interpretation is not correct, but they don't see the interaction effect. Can you see it from up here? Between renters and geographic and old and new? That's a major finding. I found it, but it's a major finding. Who knows what else is there? There's critical empirical data missing. And if this is, apart from traffic, parking is a major problem for everybody in the city. All the time. This is not the time to be doing bad reports. This is the time we need the staff to be on their A game, and quite frankly, we need you to be on your A game. Anyhow, continuing. Empirical data is missing from this. You've got it, what's his name, who does that code enforcement, does great reports. There's an example of great reports. Why isn't that in here? For you to understand the parking problems, you need to understand that code enforcement problem. And you need to trend it over years, which he did the last time, after I talked to him about it. Did a great job with trending that. That's important data. You have none of that before you. The critical demographic data is missing. Aging, income, household composition. Aging people use less cars. If we're an aging city, what is that going to do? Where is that data? It's not there. And worse, if there is a worst, you're being asked to make comparisons without knowing whether the things you're comparing are doing a good job or a bad job. Why should we adopt Mission Viejo's standards if Mission Viejo has more code enforcement problems than we do? On the other hand, if Mission Viejo's doing a great job, sure, they got something going. All you're given, and it's a lot of work, it's a good start. It's a great start. This is a very good draft. I was a professor for many years. If I got this from one of my students, I'd give him a C- and I'd say, come back, you're on the right track. This is what you need to do. No, there's nothing wrong. This is a good first draft. There's nothing wrong with this. It's got lots of data. Shows, a lot of work. But parking. This is not the B game. This is not the C team. This needs the A team. So by all means, go ahead and discuss. Absolutely. I'm so happy to see us talking about planning. Almost didn't write this lest it stop you from talking about it. Please talk about it. I want you to. The citizens want you to talk about it. But please don't make a decision until your staff give you an A report. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Do you have anyone else that wants to talk to this item? Okay. We'll come back up here. Before you start, I just wanted to mention, I think it's very difficult to talk just about ordinances when we talk about parking in the city of Lake Forest. And I kind of heard that you said, well, these are two different subjects, code enforcement, parking, and the zoning. And I really think it can't be two subjects. It's got to be one. So just keep that in mind as we're discussing these things. And I think it's fair game to talk about what's currently happening and where those problems are, why they're there, and that sort of thing. Otherwise, how are we going to know how to fix them in the future? Commissioner Hamilton, thank you for indulging me.
Sure. So let me first start off by saying the street sweeping comment. I think it's a great comment from the public. Thank you for bringing that up. I kind of see it more from a urban runoff kind of perspective in water, and so for that reason alone, I'd be in favor of properly cleaning the street to make sure that the items, that would then trickle down to the little, waterways that turn into the drains, that turn into the creeks, that go to the beach. Those things, are to me the importance of, the street sweeping, and I think that's even, the primary reason for doing that anyway. So, if it happens to help out in parking, I think that's another benefit, but I think mine would primarily be for urban runoff. But I think we agree, but just different reasons why. So I'll start off with the multifamily residential required parking residential. I think that's where we first started. And I'm going to mention this also in the guest, but I'm just going to talk about the residents. So you look through and you see some of the outliers, and to me, this kind of goes to where are the parking issues in the surrounding communities? Can you compare and say, okay, you can see La Palma. That's a problem city throughout, both on resident and guest. You can see some of the beach communities have higher standards for both resident and guest. And so resident, I think, another methodology to look at this is by looking at the mean. I looked at the mean. I think that's a great, not exclusive standard, but it's going to be a barometer. And I think that the mean, it looked like we were decent again if other cities weren't either a lot further worse than us or a lot better than us. And so I think for resident, I like I also want to discuss the graduated. I think it might be maybe a little bit too much graduated, because some of the larger houses, you're just going to have, unless they're like 3-story houses, you're just going to have that extra square footage on the, the larger house has a larger square footage, which means larger room between houses, and it just automatically affords more parking. So, I think we might have been just a little bit low and say like the 1 unit. I don't know how many 1 units. It might be good to have another part of the report that has maybe quantities so that we can kind of see mix. Even though I know that the existing mix does not necessarily predict future mix, but just as a potential. Another potential guide to see the existing mix to help us understand, what are because there's going to be some trend from future, from past experience sometimes does have future trends, but not necessarily prediction. So that would be my comments on resident.
Okay. Commissioner Ruplanek, any comments on that portion of it?
Yeah. I do have some comments, and one I want to, both Bob's comment with street sweeping is point, right on point. I did the same thing, and it's unfortunate that we had those opportunities to not properly sign the city to take cars off the street on those days. I'd love to have that in my own neighborhood. Way too many people got vehicles parked out there, and I watched the street sweeper go around them, and sometimes there's one, sometimes there's 2 or 3 stacked back to back to back, and it's really kind of it's a waste of city resources to have that happen, in my opinion. So I appreciate the comment. I also appreciate Dr. Gardner's comments with regard to some of the things that are lacking in this report. And I think age demographics has got to be included. We're talking about that when we come into the new housing tracts and the things that are being developed or will be developed in the future here. Who's the buyer? What's the family going to look like? We already have that. And we need to be kind of looking at that now, how that changes in regard to the number of units that we should be looking at for future growth. So I'd like to see that an age demographic included in anything before any decisions are made with regard to that. Whether or not how we compare to other cities, I have questions as to the validity of that. I think there are some things that can be used there, but I don't want to rely on how we're doing against other cities because we don't know how they're doing in the way that they manage these things. So until we are able to ascertain that, we can take county averages and I've always been leery of statistics, I guess. I was leery when I had to take it in college, and I'm not just as leery now as I was back then. To me, statistics are designed to prove the point you want to prove. So I'm not real big on that. I think I've said enough for this one. We'll kind of go on from there.
Next, Commissioner Fuentes.
I think I talked to Cheryl today, and I think what she was asking for in the multifamily housing and with regards to our opinion, you might be looking for guest parking as a standard today at .2. Do we think we need to increase that? I think that might be something that we would like to consider increasing. Do we look at the standards for parking based on rooms versus square footage? My first thought would be rooms. So to answer, to maybe kind of set direction, in my opinion, we're looking at more guest parking spaces and looking at rooms.
Good. Mr. Brower?
Okay. First, I think I want to start with just prefacing what we're really, obviously at the end of the day today, we're not even necessarily making suggestions other than suggested directions for future suggestions. So I'm not terribly worried about whether or not we agree at this point. But that said, the key, in my opinion, to what we're doing here, even when we get to a finished product, is we're looking at development standards which help alleviate making the problem worse with the limited number of new units that will ever be built in this town. We have very little undeveloped space. So, long term, not that we're wasting our effort, I think it's important, but it's not going to impact the problem we have on the streets today. And we need to keep that in mind before we go beating each other up and beating staff up and beating anybody else up. It's just, I think we need to make sure that we're working together, public and public servant, with that in mind. And then getting to some of the report specific, I think one of the things I would like to see, and this is based partially on my own preparation for today before this morning's conference, and partially incorporating some feedback that I gained this morning, so it was a valuable event. But two of the speakers on one of the panels were talking specifically, not specifically on parking, but specifically on how development standards in general are perceived and how they impact development as far as when potential development is being considered. Do we want to go to that city? Do we want to go to this city? Whether it's residential, whether it's commercial, doesn't matter. And I think one of the things that we have here, one of the things that really jumped out at me, and I'm going to use Table 1 on page 68, which is 6 of 15 on the report, as an example. We look at existing multifamily parking standards, and we've got a breakdown for 0 to 1 bedroom, 2 to 3 bedroom, and then that's if it's 2 or more dwelling units, basically duplex, triplex, quadplex. As soon as you get to 5 units in the project, it changes to a different set of standards. It has nothing to do with bedrooms, it has to do with square footage. Why are we changing gears? It makes no sense to me. We need to streamline it, that sort of stuff. Even taking out whether or not we change the numbers of spaces, we need to make the standards more streamlined. Because, and I think Commissioner Fuentes touched on it, it really should be tied to the number of bedrooms, regardless of, is it a single family, is it a multifamily with only 3 units, is it a multifamily with 300 units? If it's a 5-bedroom place, there's a certain number of people that are going to live there. There's a certain size of family and likely age of family members in a 5-bedroom place. It's just the way it is. As age demographics change, people move to the appropriate size house for their size family, for their size, for their age, etc. So while age is a valid concern, it's something that shifts over time. The number of bedrooms is not going to shift. How that particular unit is being utilized is not likely to shift drastically, in my opinion. And so that would be my biggest recommendation at this point, is that we look at streamlining our requirements.
Thank you. With regard to the multi-unit, I just want to clarify one thing first. When we're talking about guest parking, are we talking about overnight parking?
It can be. It's not generally restricted. Some parking management plans do say no overnight parking in guest, but it's not in the code that way.
Yeah, because that makes a significant difference. If it's guest parking, then we really severely limit. If it's only during, daylight hours, basically, it really severely limits how useful those extra parking places can be. So that's the first thing, is I would want to make sure that guest parking is utilized 24 hours a day. And then I think that guest parking needs to be increased. We do need to have more for our multifamily units. I think there's a couple of areas where we find the most problems in our city. So judging by history, we can look at some of those and maybe predict what's going to happen in the future. In the multifamily rentals, that's where we see the most problems with parking on site. We see a lot of people on the streets, all around the neighbors' areas and everything else. And so they do overflow, and that is an issue. And so we probably need to increase the requirements for that. And I'm not going to belabor it, but the fact that we allowed Brookfield to actually have a variance with less parking than they should have is just exactly the kind of example that's going to cause us headaches in the future. As far as the number of bedrooms are concerned, I do think the number of bedrooms makes a difference. I think that's probably ought to be our standard. But I also agree that we need to look at some of the demographics. There's a trend towards multi-generational housing. It's one thing if an area is on the lower spectrum of the price scale, so that you have young families with small kids, and you have a 2 or 3 bedroom apartment, and you're going to have 2 cars, maybe 3. Okay, but it's another thing if you have that same 3-bedroom apartment, and the parents have been living there, and they now are moving in their grown kids and their family. Now you get 4, 5, 6 cars easily, and that happens all the time. So I honestly think we need to look at that, and especially in light of one of our newest developments now has actually, in single-family residences, actually had 18 lots that they were designated as multifamily lots, multi-generational lots. So that is a trend that's going to continue, and something that we need to look at. Again, it's hard for me to break apart our ordinance versus what's actually happening, because the reason we're even looking at this is because we're having problems. It seems that I didn't see any place in the studies here what the average number of cars is per apartment or per household, regardless of how many bedrooms it has. And so I'd kind of like to know, how many cars do people have? My family has 3. There's two of us driving and we have 3 cars, so 3 vehicles. One of them is an oversized vehicle, which makes a difference too. And I think that's extremely common. I think it's very common for people in apartment buildings and condos to bring a work vehicle home. So they may have a work truck in addition to their 2 cars. And so it would be good to know what the averages are, what the norms are, and then we could say, okay, well, we're assuming there's 2 adults there and they're going to have 2 cars, but that may not be the case at all. I mean, the averages may be that we're sitting at 3 and 3 or more cars per family like that. So I just think that would be useful data to have before we make final decisions on future projects. I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but the one thing Commissioner Hamilton mentioned was when you have a 5-bedroom place, particularly if it's a single-family residence, you may have more property, more driveway space, and all that. I don't think that's true anymore. I think it used to be true. And so in the older parts of our cities, that may be true. In the newer parts of our cities, with the smaller lots, they're putting bigger homes on them. And if we get to some point in the future where we have an Irvine-like atmosphere, where, I know I've gone to a lot of different friends' houses in Irvine, and because they're built a lot on cul-de-sacs and things, there are no driveways. There are no street curbs to park against, so that the parking becomes extremely limited, even though you have these big houses. So, just something to think about. That I think the number of bedrooms probably does indicate more cars, and particularly if you start talking about multi-generational again. It gives you the ability to have more families that are driving. I think that's all I have for right now. And, you want to start with the single-family residences, Commissioner Hamilton?
Yeah, I just wanted to circle back. There were a few items I wanted to also discuss, and thank you for that last one. I think with new construction, there can be limits. Yeah, I've been on one of those streets too, so I appreciate that. So I just wanted to also reiterate the dual standard, that's mentioned in the staff report, both the square footage and the bedroom. I think the bedroom is the better choice also. That's my opinion. The aging, I just wanted to touch on that too and say that, we recently moved and replaced, original owner occupants, and they were there for probably, I'm thinking, like 35 years. So part of the city aging is going to automatically, they're moving to a retirement community out of state. So you're going to get a lot of that cycle just from normal sale. And that's happened to the first house we lived in Lake Forest. That was a more aging street. The residents were more aging, and we were like a new, younger, type family. So I think there's a lot of turnover that can occur. So anyway, that was one of the things I was saying. And going back to the guest, so I'll talk about the guest, and I think some of us have talked to the guest. Steph was saying something like 0.5. I just looked at the cities that I have kind of some more experience in. I've driven through some of the Santa Anas that have like the 0.5s. I've driven through the San Juans that have the 0.8 as a standard to start off. I've driven through I think it was. Let me make sure I'm looking at the right one. Yeah, the San Juan and the Santa Ana were the ones I was going to mention. I haven't had experience in La Palma, but again, it kind of reiterates that point of, what's your benchmark and where are the parking problems at? And so that kind of analysis, talking about where are the problems in other cities. Santa Ana, there's a horrendous parking problem in Santa Ana that I've experienced. So that makes sense why they're going to be a lot higher. The problem is, again, they're fully built out or nearly fully built out. So, I appreciate Commissioner Brower's comments on that. So, I mean, just my feel on where things are, like for guests and how we can maybe improve the limited stock that we have in the future. I would think close to like a .25 that I believe Irvine had, or a Mission Viejo of .33. I feel like I'm pretty familiar with those cities. On the multifamily guest, I just wanted to mention that. So going to single family, I think I kind of talked that already. So unless, do you want us to talk tandem too to kind of speed things up, or do you want to do another round of tandem?
We'll take that one separate.
Okay.
That's what we're talking about. Commissioner Rublight, any other comments?
Yeah, I do. And what's been brought up here, I think, is really quite important. And I appreciate what Commissioner Brower and Commissioner Hamilton have said about this. To me, is kind of like closing closing the barn door after the horses got out. We don't have that much, if any, space left to develop. So anything that we're talking about making changes to is going to have an insignificant impact in our city. Because this is not retroactive. It has no application to the OSA areas. It has no application to existing neighborhoods. So all we can do is look at if we were to have any space available, and if for future development, what would we want to do with it? And right now, unless the city comes into some massive land grant some way, that's just not going to happen. I mean, I think the city, in terms of the definition of what it is pretty well done. I mean, I could be wrong. I don't have any crystal ball. So when we're looking at this, okay, .2 parking for a guest doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's .2 or if it's 1.0. It's not applicable to anything. It's not going to resolve any of the issues that we currently have on there. What's going to resolve those issues, in my interpretation, is how many people are living in those units and how many cars are associated with the people living in those units, and what does that do? And that becomes a code enforcement issue. So, I don't want to throw this back on Lou and his group, but that's really where it goes. I've said this before, my biggest issue on single families is exactly the point that we have where we've got multi-generations in the homes, and we've got multiple vehicle operators in those homes, and we've got 2- and 3-car garages with 2- and 3-car driveways that are being utilized as storage bins. And so we end up with 2, 3, 4, 5 cars in the same occupancy residence on the street at multiple times, and many overnight you'll have 3, 4, 5 cars from the same home on the street. And it's because they don't park them in the driveway, and they couldn't get them in their garage if their life depended on it. So that now becomes one of how far-reaching can the city go to take them to the point where they need to clean the trash out of the garage and put the cars in the garage, or at least get them up out there. And I would be highly in favor of, instead of working on this code, which is, in my book, it's a moot point, I would be more interested in code enforcement, where we restrict the number of vehicles that can be left on the street at any one time per individual residence.
Thank you. No. Who's your point?
Thank you. Well, I think we need to go back to why we're looking at the study, and I think we're looking at the study because it's something that we inherited 20 years ago from the county, and it's outdated. And even if we have one apartment complex come into our city, that it's prudent to have a document that is streamlined, as CJ has mentioned, and that works for us and works for businesses that want to come into our city, and developers and new residents. So I think with kind of veering off and talking about going out and determining how many cars are in households today, does that apply to this particular question on the table today, which is a new parking document? I don't think so. I don't know, and I would ask city staff, is that something that you have at hand, or are you going to have to go out and survey every household, determine that I have one car in a 5-bedroom home and he has 3 in a whatever bedroom home?
Chairman Zachmeister, members of the commission, the U.S. Census does publish, and the American Community Survey does publish vehicles available. So I'm looking right now at the 2012 estimate, Lake Forest City, and it estimates that 2% of households have no vehicles available. 26.6% of households have 1 vehicle available, 43.6% have 2 vehicles available, and 27.7% have 3 or more vehicles available. We can take that same information and break it down by census tract with the same sources that I used to break down the household size and other data that's there. So it is available, and it is a snapshot in time. It's 2012 estimate is the best that ACS has online right now. So if that answers your question.
Thank you, yes. So I just think that we ought to look at what is before us and act prudently to update our parking standards. And if it's as simple as determining the number of bedrooms, adding a few guest parking spaces, and just getting something that is clean and good for development in the city, whether it's 3 homes or 3,000 homes. I think that talking about who lives in our households today, I think we learned today at this conference that the boomers, they're not selling right now. But 6 months from now, maybe they will. But right now they're not. So what we say tonight may change 6 months from now. It may change 2 years from now. So I think it's a constant look at. But what I would like to act upon is just making this document clean and good for the city. Thank you.
Mr. Brown.
There's been so much already. I've lost track of what I wanted to add on to and congratulate everything. I need to take better notes. I'm going to have to download the video later. But some of the highlights, I guess. I agree that what we're doing as to any changes to the code is kind of like closing the barn door after the horses have gotten out, although it's still important to go and close the door. There might be 1 or 2 horses still in there. Say what we can, but at the same time, I do think it's also important that we do this project and we attack this because it not only affects that's the minimal amount of future development as far as undeveloped land is concerned, but it also has the potential to affect as we age and as developments change. As developers maybe come in and as demographics continue to shift, we may find ourselves at a point where it makes sense for some developer to buy up a whole neighborhood so that he can tear houses down and turn it into condos, or apartments. I certainly don't have a crystal ball, and if I did, I wouldn't have thought we'd have Boston in the World Series. I would have thought the Angels would have made the playoffs at least. But the point, I guess, is that it still needs to be done. We still need to do it right, and because we don't know what's going to change, and we need to have something that's flexible enough to adapt with the changes, but clean enough to encourage the right changes at the same time. And also, one of the things that I think is a good idea would be to include in the finished product here maybe some consideration for room additions. When we're talking about single-family homes, okay, you got your neighborhood built out there in Baker Ranch with your single-family home. Baker Ranch may be a hard sell on this particular example because they don't have lots big enough, but they decide, we want to give up our backyard to build an extra bedroom so that mom can move in. Okay, great. You're going to have to find an additional parking spot to account for it. Otherwise, you don't get the permit. I don't think that that's an unreasonable thing to say. I don't like to put too many burdens on property owners, be they residential or commercial, but I think that's a reasonable burden because of the burden that development and that growth is going to put on the residents. And then I don't want to open a can of worms and put too much more on a thin staff already, but I'm curious, some of the research that's been talked about, some of the demographics that we've talked about, how difficult would it be to compare DMV statistics to our addresses? In other words, get a report from the DMV that says, at this address there are 5 vehicles registered. And we can look at a 2-bedroom house. Okay. We don't need to necessarily tie names to it as far as published reports. We don't need to invade privacy and whatnot. It can be redacted as to individuals. I'm just curious about the numbers. How much work would that be? Is that even possible?
Chairman and Planning Commission, the census data that we've been using to date and American Community Survey is readily available. We don't have a contact at the DMV. We could check in with the Sheriff's Department. I know they can tell which cars are registered to which houses, and probably vice versa, but I don't have an answer to how readily available, and if it's public information, or if it's just something that the Sheriff's Department can pull based on a case. I'd have to get back with you on that.
Fair enough.
May I just say something, Commissioner? I have 4 vehicles registered with the DMV, and 1 lives in my house. So it might be skewed.
Fair enough.
Could be swayed, yeah. That's interesting.
I have a lot of children who like cars.
I think I may have a vehicle somewhere too that's not on my current premises, so, yeah. Well, point well taken.
The benefit of having older children as opposed to 6 and 8, I wouldn't have thought of that. Thank you.
As long as you consider the benefit.
Okay, I just had, you guys covered it all very well. I just have a couple other comments. And one time I'll come back one more. I agree with everyone in that we need to look at this because there is going to be infill, there are going to be second dwelling units, and there are going to be people coming back trying to change things that are already exist in the city. So even though we don't have a lot of extra vacant land, there will be things that happen, and that's why we're doing this. But one of the reasons I think that we're doing this also has a lot to do with the fact that we get a lot of complaints all the time about parking. That's why I can't split it off from that portion of, and Jerry was right, it's code enforcement. But I think that in doing this, we also need to be looking at that piece of it as well. Because we can change this, but we're still going to keep getting complaints about parking. So we need to come up with some document that goes along with this. And what I was thinking about as I was reading all this is parking guidelines for code enforcement. I'm going to say, here's what our ordinances are. But if we have a home, when I talk about single-family residences, I think we're pretty good in the northeastern part of the city. I think when we get down towards the Rockfield area, and I have a couple of friends who live down there, there are far too many cars per household down there. I don't know how they can even have that many people in a house, but he has told me many times that the cars are going to be 3 or 4 cars parked in front of his house, as well as across the street where they live. There'll be 3 or 4 more cars, and as we mentioned earlier, half of them are not in. None of them in the driveway. Although he has mentioned a time or two of one on the lawn. So. But those get into code enforcement issues, and if we're going to make this valuable, I think we need to take a look at that at the same time when we're making this parking discussion. All right, moving on. Right on. You want to go to Tandem Parking?
Yes. As we're sitting here, I kind of pulled back to my Tustin Planning Commission days, and I remember the residents uniting sometimes to come together and get implement like a permit process. So I think that could be potential that in the existing neighborhoods with parking problems, that we maybe implement a process for residents to come to, and maybe it already exists.
We do.
And maybe then the issue is then community outreach to blanket the city, blanket those neighborhoods that have the code enforcement problems, and tell them, hey, you can come to the city and try to decide for your neighborhood what's the best thing. And that's what really I like is the public and their involvement in the decisions for their neighborhood. So I am very excited about remembering that from my previous life as a planning commissioner. I think your comment, Cheryl, about the I think it was 27% was 3 and over. So, I mean, that's pretty much the Pareto, the 80-20 rule. It's pretty doggone close to 80-20. So, 20% of the population provides 80% of the problem. So, I mean, that's another, it's the problem with the 3+ cars. And last I was just going to say, I get concerned about the city making the decisions for people to clean out their garage or park how many cars are on the street. And I just think, just Big Brother, just this big brother light bulb flashes up in my head. And I say it with a smile, Jerry. Commissioner.
I'm for smaller government.
Commissioner Verplank. But so I say that, and I just had to mention that. So Tandem. Tandem, I have, like I've said from the dais here before, I've owned a Tandem garage. We enjoyed it immensely. Should we have standards for it? Sure. I think it's important to, we're not going to be a city that allows like a sawmill next to a residential, it's not compatible. So the same token, I think, Tandem would have to be compatible. We'd have to have standards, but I'm all for it.
Commissioner Verplank?
No.
Okay. Commissioner Fuentes.
Thank you. So I have a tandem garage, as do a lot of my neighbors. I don't think any of us use it for a garage. I've got, a nice little sofa out there. And how, if we use that extra parking as one of our 3 parkings for a 5-bedroom home, I just don't know how many people would use them. I think if I had 2 Volkswagens, it might work, but it's just a difficult thing it's just never been used in our neighborhood. So I would hesitate to use tandem parking in garages in single-family homes as a check. That's 3 parkings. I would hesitate with that. Ooh. Thank you.
Commissioner Browder.
I've lived in, years ago, it was before kids, I had a lot less storage needs than I do now. I can see where it would be very easy for the front half of a tandem to be used for other than park. At the moment I wish I had a garage at all, but that's a different argument. But I think what we need to do is twofold on tandems. I don't like the idea of a blanket ban, but I do think it's important to acknowledge that a fairly significant percentage of them won't be used, and therefore it certainly wouldn't be a one-to-one relationship. Maybe a 0.5, maybe even a 0.4. I don't know, again, how readily available the data is as to what that percentage should be, but I would agree that it would be a reduced number. And I think there should be a specific number. If we're not going to blanket ban something, we need to have a specific number so that we're not having the wheel spinning case by case that we've had in the past of, well, should we count it, should we not count it? We need to clarify, we need to make a standard that any developer can look at and say, yes, I can work my building around that standard, or that doesn't work for me, I'll move down to the next town because I don't want to build under that particular restriction. I mean, I think it's better for us, it's better for developers, it's better for everybody if we have a clear standard. I'm not comfortable going to a full ban, so I think we need to figure out what the number is.
Hey, can I just piggyback and say I agree in empirical data to create the standard.
Okay. Commissioner Rapani.
Okay, we had this discussion with Brookfield, and you all know how I voted on Brookfield, but beside the point, that was one of the issues that we're creating more of a problem, not less of a problem, and the data shows that most people won't use the tandem garage for what it's intended to be. So I think if we're going to deal with this, we need to have a different count. It needs to be more difficult for the builder. It needs to be more costly for the builder to use that if that's what they choose to do, because they're going to put those cars on our streets then, and then we're inheriting the problem. So I'm not in favor of saying you can't have tandem. That's not the point. The point is if we're going to allow it, let's get something back for it, because it's going to cost us. That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
Yes, I could just piggyback real quick. I agree. I had intended to add what I had like a moment ago and forgot, but I do think that one of the things coming out of Brookfield that I really liked was the condition for approval that they had that plan in place. That, we'll have to see. I guess it'll be a learning experience how it plays out on an enforcement standpoint, but at least from an initial attempt standpoint, we pushed the burden off on the developer and said, we're going to give it to you, but you better do what you said you're going to do. And as long as we, I think, do that and have the teeth in the code to come back later and say you didn't do it, so now you've got to pay the bill for enforcement or whatever, then I do think we need that mechanism.
Commissioner Fuentes?
Was the Brookfield development tandem parking in garages or was it open?
Garages.
Thank you.
I want to add a comment here, and I don't know if it's appropriate or not. I think it is. It won't be long before we get another project in that same area. All right? And I would like us to have this in place before that event occurs, because we're going to be looking at the same exact set of circumstances with that project when that Mercedes dealership's going.
Okay, throw my 2 cents in here, then you guys can come back. I think tandem parking is a double-edged sword. But before I go on into that aspect of it, let's say the current code seems to imply the way it's written is that we don't allow tandem parking. I agree we should allow tandem parking, but I don't believe we should count it as more than one space. That's it, one space only. And here's why I think it's a double-edged problem. First is, most people won't park it. So you've already created a parking issue in that development. The second is that tandem parking is typically used in those places where you have higher density in order to create more living space for the occupants and blah, blah, blah. We heard that whole argument. Okay. So you probably already have a parking issue. And now you're exacerbating it by giving them points for something that probably won't be used anyway. So I'm all for sticking to one for one on the tandem parking, even though there's 2 spaces available. Who would like to comment?
The only thing I would add to that is if the data shows that that's what's needed, I would absolutely agree. I just think we need to see the data.
The other thing I didn't mention, I forgot, is honestly, I think it's a little naive to think that CC&Rs are going to solve Brookfield's parking problems. We had people from the public come up and talk to us from, I think it was a condominium association in Foothill Ranch that had those kinds of CC&Rs, and she said it was a nightmare to enforce. They were constantly having problems. So, it's good to say that, that will solve the problem. Honestly, I don't think it would. I'm expecting to see a lot of street parking out there.
I live in association that has parking problems in spite of CCNRs, so I get that side of it. I just think that we push the burden at least on them, as long as we have the document that says, hey, this is your burden. It's your nightmare, not ours. That's more what I was leaning towards than thinking that it would actually fix it.
And that's why we need to keep it off of the city streets. Let it be their burden. Let it be within their compound. That way they have to deal with it. We don't.
Mr. Hammond?
And I think I appreciate everyone's comments on the tandem parking. I guess I had a question for staff is that can we impose a permit process from the get-go? So could we have could we say, and I just also want to say that I'm rooting for that Mercedes dealer. I know maybe the odds might be against them. I'm still rooting for them. I'm rooting for convenience for residents to purchase a vehicle in Lake Forest. I'm rooting for the sales tax the city gets. So I say that with a smile. But anyway, so like say if another just open parcel were to come before us, and could we impose a condition that requires the permit process on top of the allowing the HOA to enforce?
Would you want to impose a permit process for the city streets, or a permit for within their own development? Because that's really would be what you would be reviewing as the planning commission. Well, we can bring back some more information for you about the city's existing parking permit process, because it's a process that has guidelines. That you make an application, they count this. It's not. You have to meet certain criteria in order to be allowed to go to a permit parking process. So there is a set process in place. I feel a little uncomfortable to impose it on a new development that isn't meeting any of the thresholds. But we can bring back some more information just so you can understand how that works. Because I think that's what I'm seeing, that in this, when we come back, you'd like more information about some of the other areas that we just mentioned in the table, some of the other tools that we have to address existing parking problems. Because you want to look at that so we can provide more information about that.
Yeah, the only thing I was going to say, again, reaching back to the past in Tustin, almost all in Tustin Ranch, all the roads are private roads. So I'm 99% sure that this was a private road, Tustin Ranch parking permit process that was. So if there are differences between public streets and private streets, I think that would be an interesting conversation too.
One thing, going along those lines, one thing I had thought about too on the Brookfield development is that probably will be or could be a solution at some point in time if we find that there's a lot of overflow onto the streets, too much so, and into the adjoining shopping centers, that maybe a permit parking might lend some organization or structure to that. I think right now we're like no parking right along those areas. So if it becomes an issue, that might be one alternative to help alleviate no overnight. Well, but still, that's the same thing if you're talking about a resident that needs one extra parking place. So. Any other have we hit everything first? What did we miss?
Well, we've got a lot of good input, and so as we said in the beginning, we're not looking for any decisions. We wanted to present some of the information to help frame the issue, make you understand, how changes to the residential parking code, how we're going to be able to use them. So I think we've had a lot of good education. We can certainly bring back some more information about other ways to address existing parking problems, and other data that you may want to look at. But happy to do that.
Sure.
If you don't mind, I'd like to ask a couple of questions about some of the data requests, specifically going back to the age demographics. Just having spent some time with the census data over the last couple of weeks, they have the breakdowns are a little awkward. So we have 18 and over which gets most of your driving age, and that kind of breaks out by census tract. Or there's some very fine definitions, 0 to 4, 5 to 8, and I don't think that's what you're looking for. I just want to clarify that. And then you did say who's the buyer. So there is age of householder in the data. Is that something you would be interested in as well? And that, again, is just, we have 2012 estimates here. So we're not demographers. So to project the age of householder out further, that would take, we'd have to find some other sources.
Okay, no, I don't think I need the age of the homeowner per se. That does have some value because the older you get, the less you drive. And we do see a number of different things taking place, including the automotive industry, which I think, I don't know whether that's going to be a factor or not. As we move away from the gasoline-powered vehicles to the electric-powered vehicles, they'll be smaller, typically, and that will solve some of the problem, I think, because the smaller the vehicle, hopefully the easier it'll be to park at least off-street if possible. So, anyway, I don't know. I'm not sure how far we're going to get on this, but I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Any other final comments from anyone? Okay, I think we wrap this discussion up. Let's move on. That takes us to director's comments.
I just wanted to let you know, and also the public know that are here, there's due to a Edison power outage in this area that's scheduled to occur. We had to power down all the computer systems, which started at, it started earlier this evening, and because of that we were not able to videotape this meeting. We do have the regular old-fashioned recorder, and if anyone wants to listen to a tape, we'll have the tape available, but it won't be, I'm not sure we can get that on the city's website.
Was this a planned outage or a surprise?
No, it's a planned outage, so we've been working with the IT people to make sure that we take care of our servers and the other things.
I know how to solve that problem. Since I'm in the backup power.
You know somebody.
Yeah.
Is that an advertisement?
Maybe. Thank you. How about let's move on to our city attorney.
I have no comments tonight.
All right, thank you. Let's start over on this end. Commissioner Brower?
I just wanted to give a quick thank you to staff for encouraging the participation and also carpooling today. I really enjoyed the event and got a lot out of it. So, for those who are saying what event, it was the 2013 Planning Officials Forum. So, it was held at the Nixon Library, and there was a lot of useful information, specifically on public demographics was the one that I got the most out of. So.
Commissioner Fuentes.
And I was there with Commissioner Brower and staff, and it was a good meeting. I learned a lot, and I appreciate being encouraged to go. Also appreciate the information included in our packet tonight. It was clear and concise, and have a great week.
Thank you. Commissioner Verplank? I need to address you correctly. Vice Chair Verplank.
Whatever you want to call me, if food's involved, then call me late. I want to thank the public for coming because we really do appreciate the interest that you present and the comments. And tonight was a good topic that needed some additional comments, so we do appreciate that. And staff, I appreciate the way you put this together, and I'm looking forward to getting into this with whatever the next round is. I don't know, is this our second round of this? Third? I don't know. We just need to keep hammering away until we get it into a nice, concise program, but looking forward to doing it.
Commissioner Hamilton.
Not a whole lot. I really enjoyed the meeting tonight. I think we had a great discussion. I think this commission works well together. and I appreciate everyone's input. And thanks, staff, for the reports and the work for tonight. Thank you. Oh, and I'm glad that everyone's healthy up on the dais here too.
Thank you. And I'll just close with a couple of comments. I want to thank, again, also thank the people in the audience that came in tonight from the public to give them public comments. All of them are greatly appreciated. Staff did a great job again tonight. This parking issue is a big one and needs to be dealt with, so thank you very much. That's all I have, and I'm going to...
Can I just add one more?
Sure.
I like I especially like the street sweeping, and both comments, I think, both people who mentioned tonight. And I also thought I'd mention that my mind just went blank. The Halloween parties next to the Heritage Hill, thank you. I was saying Nottingham, and like, that's not the right one. The Heritage Hill events were, I think, very successful. Also, after or near the end of one of those events, we actually, from our house, which is over 500 feet away from it, could hear loud and clear the music. And we didn't mind, but I just thought I'd say it was extremely loud. It was almost like a neighbor party, but it was at a decent time, and I think they shut down goods. But it was, I'm talking like, I thought it was a neighbor until I got onto the street and said, that noise, that music is coming from a large distance away. So, don't mind, but I thought I'd just mention it.
I have one more comment. This is kind of more or less an advisory than anything. Tomorrow night, El Toro High School opens their new football stadium, and I highly recommend you avoid the area at all costs.
Good warning. Okay, seeing no more comments, I'm going to adjourn the meeting to the next regularly scheduled meeting, which would be November 14th. So, good night.
Think you're going to be there? I'm not going. Oh, you're staying away from here.
Yeah, I'll turn that off. I know this here.
Oh, if you don't,
Edison will. Yeah, they will. Thanks for your help.
it didn't turn this off though. Doesn't it turn this off too? Oh, you didn't turn off.
No, I just turned the sound system off.
Oh, that thing.
Oh, do not turn off, it says.
Then we won't turn
That's why I
What's your attempt to make this tonight?
That's a big project.
Well, between tonight and tomorrow.
What are you making it out of?
What if you turn the, what about turning the button?
It's just
Does that do it?
Cool.
Yeah, the dial thing?
my daughter, who doesn't have any
Is that strange?
has a 6-year-old girl.
I don't think it was, I don't remember it being on when I moved it over. But
It don't matter.
I have to ask Peggy, because I don't remember it being on when I moved it over to Lisa.
I found it so
Where is it? In the back? I know I disconnected the one glass thing when I moved it over and had to plug it in again.
Spiders all over it. And then all of a sudden,
Oh, you talked about that.
she just started going on the stairs. I thought she'd said, yeah, that's right. Wedding cake's too smooth.
I think I have seen
So I went online and I found this and I'm going to try to replicate. Cool. Good luck.
Happy birthday, Uncle Joe.
Okay, I'll never be able to read my notes.
Oh, well, I have notes too.
I'm sure they are. Here's one I don't have to change your diet.
Yeah, we'll go.
We're going to get that. Shut it off.
Yeah, shut it off.